My husband was cruel. He kept insulting me because I couldn't bear him a son. 7 years later, we ended up in court, and he couldn't believe what I'd done. The sound of Scott slamming his fist on the table shook our entire house. The dinner I'd lovingly prepared scattered across the floor. It was a heartbreaking scene that showed just how insensitive a husband he'd become. "If I'd known you weren't a real woman, I never would have married you," Scott yelled. Those words cut through my heart like a sharp knife. With tears in my eyes, I said, "Scott, how can you say such a thing? I've given you everything. I've always loved you faithfully." Scott, still fuming, replied, "Your tears mean nothing to me. You're a disappointment. You're a woman who can't give me what I want most." With a trembling voice, I stammered, "Really, Scott? I'm sorry I couldn't meet your expectations. But I'm more than just my ability to have children." Scott scoffed, "You'll never understand, Kendall. What it means to be a real man, to have a son to carry on your bloodline. I need a boy. You've failed at that." Even now, 7 years after that incident, the memory of those cruel words still echoes in my mind. How could he become so cold? So insensitive? Why did he change so much after we got married? What did I do to deserve such treatment? I'm still asking myself these questions. Scott and I met in school and started dating when we were 15. He was a hardworking and thoughtful young man towards me back then. "Kendall, you're glowing today. That blouse looks incredibly good on you," he'd say. A little embarrassed, I'd say, "Oh, thank you, Scott. You always compliment me and make me feel special." Scott would continue, "It's because it's true, Kendall. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. This isn't just because we're dating. I feel it deep in my heart." With joy, I'd add, "Scott, you always make me feel loved. You're the best boyfriend anyone could have." Our relationship was always full of beautiful words like this. But things changed after we got married. Scott's dream was to have a son, but as the years passed, I didn't get pregnant. With that came constant insults, looks of contempt, and unfair blame that hurt my heart. "Kendall, we've been trying for a kid for so long now. Why is it taking so much time?" he'd ask. I'd answer sadly, "I don't know, Scott. I want it to happen just as much as you do, but it seems to be out of our hands." Scott would retort, "But we need a child, Kendall. I've been dreaming of having a son to carry on my bloodline and continue our family name." With tears in my eyes, I'd barely manage to say, "I understand, Scott. I want that too. But it's not something we can completely control." Scott would angrily respond, "I can't stand waiting anymore." That night, Scott's face was red with anger as he suddenly stood up and yanked the tablecloth. All the dinner dishes fell to the floor. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the house, followed by an echo of the emptiness growing inside me. "This isn't right. I got married to be happy. Not to be insulted," I said. I knelt on the kitchen floor, picking up the shattered pieces of our dinner. My eyes were a mix of sadness and determination. And I continued, "I've got to make a decision. There's no reason to be insulted like this every day. I'm gonna get a divorce." I started packing my bags. I carefully folded my clothes and put them in the suitcase. Each item was a painful reminder of what were once shared dreams. Yet, they have been shattered by Scott's cruel words. The night was heavy with tension. I was organizing my few belongings in the suitcase, with a determination only a wounded heart knows. Those items were a collection of memories and broken dreams. Each piece of clothing felt heavier than its physical weight. Each folded garment was an act of courage, a step towards freedom from the emotional prison our marriage had become. As I closed the suitcase with a sigh of resignation, I felt a mix of sadness and relief wash over me. It was time to leave this abusive relationship behind and move forward, seeking a life where I'd be truly loved and valued. As I took one last look at the apartment that was once my home, I started to cry. My eyes were fixed on the walls that had witnessed so many happy moments. They were then tainted by the shadows of the past. I sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the years on my shoulders, and whispered sadly, 8 years. 3 years of dating and 5 years of marriage. How did everything change so suddenly? How did we lose our way? At that moment, I brought a glass of water to my lips, quenching my thirst with the cool, clear liquid. But that liquid couldn't quench the thirst I had for love and respect. What happened to us, Scott? I asked aloud. My voice echoed in the lonely kitchen. We were so happy, weren't we? We were so in love. Where did we go wrong? No answer came except for the empty echo off the walls, but I kept talking as if to chase away the demons tormenting my heart. I loved you with all my heart, Scott. I gave you everything I had. I believed our love could overcome any obstacle. But in the end, I was crushed by the expectations you placed on me. By the dreams I couldn't fulfill. I set down the empty glass with a resigned sigh, feeling the pain and frustration built up inside as I continued, I know I've got to move on. It's the only way I'll find the happiness I want. But it hurts, Scott. It hurts more than I can explain. As I took one last look at the now quiet kitchen, I stood up. I felt a new determination in my veins. I knew the road ahead would be tough and uncertain, but I also knew it was the only possible path to find the peace I was seeking. With hesitant but determined steps, I headed for the door. Leaving behind not just the empty apartment, but also the shadows of a painful past, stepping out towards the glow of an uncertain but new dawn. After I left, Scott apparently wandered the dark streets on the other side of town. He was tormented by the bitter words he had spoken. Realizing he had made a terrible mistake in hurting me in such a cruel and unfair way, regret was consuming him like a raging fire. How could I have become so insensitive? How could I have hurt the only person I've ever truly loved? He reportedly muttered to himself. Those words disappeared into the emptiness of the night. He now seemed overwhelmed with guilt, vividly remembering the look of pain in my eyes, how his sharp words had torn my soul apart. I love her. More than anything in this world, he confessed in a low voice, it seemed. As if by admitting it, he could somehow ease the pain he had caused. But love alone ain't enough. I failed to be the husband she deserves. I failed to understand her pain and suffering, he supposedly thought. And now, as the weight of his choices bore down on him, he was facing an abyss of regret he didn't know how to escape. I gotta fix this, he reportedly told himself, his voice full of determination and despair. I'm gonna go home and beg her forgiveness. It's the least I can do now. As Scott approached the house, he apparently became absorbed in an agonizing inner dialogue. Scott, what are you doing? You've ruined everything. You've thrown away the love of your life, he seemingly chastised himself. His voice was said to be full of self-reproach. I'm willing to do anything to make things right. But what if it's too late? What if she never looks at me the same way again? A small, doubtful voice in his heart supposedly asked. Scott swallowed hard, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of uncertainty. I can't think like that. I've gotta believe there's still a chance. That I can still make things right, he apparently declared with determination. He tried to shake off the doubts threatening to engulf him. Then do it. Stop whining and do what you gotta do, the voice in his head apparently pushed him towards the front door. Scott took a deep breath, preparing to face the unknown waiting on the other side of the door. Here goes. I'm gonna apologize and show Kendall how much I love her, he reportedly promised himself. His voice was choked with barely